Zombie Tech. Welcome to Zombie Tech, a forum for engineers, scientists, and inventors to ponder on the technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
She's Eddie.
He's Whisker.
And who do we have this week?
Today we have Jayson Tautic of Tautic.com.
I know that guy.
I know, because we've been chatting with him for a while now here in our IRC.
Yeah,
Hi.
John S.A.Z. dragged him into the IRC room kicking and screaming. And first couple of days he was like, this is kind of interesting. And then after about 3 days he was logging in at strange times and we knew he was hooked.
Yep.
Hey guys, just a little bit.
Welcome, Jayson. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, question. How did you get started in electronics? Was it a hobby first or did you do it through school?
Well, that actually goes back quite a while. Growing up, my grandfather was actually a professional electrical engineer working in the nuclear field. So
Wow.
kind of had a pretty cool mentor going into it. So he definitely inspired me, I think it probably goes back to when I was 7 or 8 years old. And I remember being over his house and he was talking about either getting a go-kart or an electronics kit from Radio Shack to play with. And
Cool.
well, should be obvious what ended up happening, but yeah, no, absolutely. Lots of great
I don't know.
memories.
Go-kart or electronics kit. I think I might have gone for the go-kart.
Yeah, nuclear powered go-kart. Yeah.
Well,
sounds like a win.
It would have been interesting.
so you ended up choosing the electronics kit?
He actually chose.
Oh, he chose. Okay.
He did choose. That's okay.
Which one did he go for?
The electronics kit.
Oh, man.
Well, otherwise you might be talking to a mechanical engineer. It's all good though.
Good point. Good point. Cool. So you are a electronics engineer. Is that what you would call yourself, or what your study is, or what you studied to become?
That's fair. Actually, going through school and so forth, actually kind of focus a little bit more on, physics, that kind of stuff.
Oh, you're one of
But,
those.
I am one of those.
Wow.
I'm also one of those that, ended up spending more time on the day job and deciding to follow the career path
Okay.
than going 100% through the whole school system. But,
Sure.
definitely learned a lot of neat, interesting things. But no, engineering wasn't one of the topics of subject.
Gotcha. So a physics crazy guy,
Mhm.
because all people who go through physics are pretty nuts. So then I have a question. Do you do conventional flow or electron flow?
That's a good question. We'll say electron. Why not?
Yes! Success! I like you more already. Awesome. I never understand why electrical and electronics engineers always decide on conventional. It's just silly.
They like to be wrong, I guess.
I guess so. So, in your day job, you do mostly like software type of stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually manage a small IT team. I
Okay.
have a number of people that work for me. We do some software development, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Primarily work on, internal facing type apps, stuff that actually help the employees of the company do their job and so forth.
Sure.
But yeah, nope, been doing computers and that kind of stuff for quite a number of years now.
Okay. And then your site, Tautic.com, is almost purely hardware, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Pretty much purely electronics. When I had originally started the site a couple years ago, I had a little bit of, more computer related stuff, some software stuff like some SharePoint stuff from Microsoft and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But no, today, absolutely 100% focuses on electronics, that kind of stuff.
Why is that?
Well, it's definitely a passion. It's one of those things that I truly enjoy doing. It's, one of the things that occupies a good deal of my spare time.
Mm-hmm.
And, just one of those subjects.
I guess it's interesting because a lot of people who tend to be software only at work also, for the most part, are software only at home, with like basic electronics tinkering maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then those who are hardware at work are also hardware at home. Whereas you like pretty much have both opposites in a day.
Many people have always told me don't mix work with pleasure. For better or worse. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. But for me, I get to play with the software side of things at work, and then I come home and play with the hardware side of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd venture to say that the things that I do for my own business and so forth do end up being a mix of both hardware and software.
Gotcha.
Focus, no question, on hardware, but I do dabble in software as well. So
Gotcha.
and it works.
And do you prefer one or the other?
Depends on the day, I'd say.
Ah, fair enough. All right. And which one, of course, because this is zombie tech, do you think which of your skills would be more important in a zombie apocalypse? Your hardware side or your software side?
Oh, hardware side, no question.
Awesome. Do we have a hardware guy on our team yet? Kind of. John S is kind of a hardware dude.
Yeah, a lot of the guys dabble.
I guess that's true. All right. And then do the people who work where you work, well, obviously, do the people where you work know about Tautic.com?
A mix. Some actually do. Some of my employees definitely do know. And when I introduced them to it and we started talking a little bit about it, I was kind of surprised to find that 2 or 3 of my team members have actually dabbled in electronics as well.
Oh, cool.
We've had some really cool side discussions, about electronics and technology in general, and it's really expanded, kind of the knowledge exchange, if you will.
Sure.
Yep.
And I think that's really interesting because you're not the first person to mention that they've, quote, discovered that other people in their teams do electronics. So to me, I would imagine that in an engineering team, like everyone's done some form of electronics, everyone's done some form of software, and it's just a matter of whether or not they do it at work or when they do it at home. Like, it seems like that'd be kind of obvious, but you guys, like, I know Brainwagon has mentioned being surprised that people at Pixar do Arduino stuff, as well as he does. And I'm like, what? They're like programmers, so why wouldn't they be programming on their spare time?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a bit odd of me to think? I don't know.
No. It kind of goes back to that work-life balance thing.
Oh.
I
People
could see
keep
some
it pretty
people.
separate.
Yeah, I think some do, some don't.
Hmm.
But it depends what works for some people.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
Hmm.
Of course, a lot of the people who I work with don't even know what zombies are.
No, and they also don't do nursing at home.
Yeah, they do.
Do they?
Yeah.
Now, Eddie's on a little bit of understanding the why and psychology behind engineering right now because she's been preparing to do an IEEE talk.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yep. Re-engineering engineering.
Good
Making engineering interesting for people who get glazed eyes easily like myself. So just interesting to hear that people, like the separation, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so let's talk more about your site here, Tautic.com. You have a whole bunch of projects that you've done. I think they're projects essentially, but they're for sale. They're in a completed form. They're available. People can use them. What are some of the things that you're selling?
Well, one thing that I can mention that he's doing is that he's got a bunch of things on there that are simple solutions to problems that all tinkerers have.
Mm-hmm.
For example, he's got a little power supply that plugs into a standard breadboard,
Mm-hmm.
and it puts a 3.3 in ground on one side and just with like header pins, and 5-volt and ground on the other one. So you just plug this thing into the wall through a wall wart and right into your motherboard, and you've got a powered breadboard just like that. Easy. That is a great little idea. He also sells like backing boards for breadboards that have pre-drilled holes in hardware for mounting various project boards too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's one for the chip kit, but it would be pretty easy to apply the idea to any that got requested, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Gotcha.
That's a great description too. One of my design principles, certainly on designing items that are simple, but they fill a need. Back when I was getting back into electronics, a couple of years ago, I started doing more and more breadboarding type things. And of course, very first thing that I would always sit there and build was a power supply on my breadboard. And, I'd go to my parts box. I'd literally have a section set aside for everything I needed to build a power supply.
Hmm.
So I'd grab all those parts, throw them in the breadboard. I'd have a little power jack soldered to some wires that would kind of stick into the breadboard, end up falling out half the time. You know how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat there and said, there's got to be a better way. So I did some looking online and so forth, and I did find a couple of other people that were doing, single output power supplies.
Mm-hmm.
But, as I was going more and more into tinkering, and seeing all these different circuits that people were starting to do using dual voltages and so forth, just kind of clicked. And I said, well, this is the better way. Why not? So I made myself one and said, this has got to be useful to somebody other than just me. So, well, I made a couple more.
Yeah.
And that kind of started it all.
Huh.
Yeah, and they're like actual printed circuit boards and surface mount stuff on there. So they're, I'm sure, pretty high, what do you say, good tolerances and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And cheap as hell, which is really what caught my eye when I saw them. I asked Jayson to send us over a couple for the show, which he kindly did. So we've been using them on and off, which we really like. Now, one thing about this is that in the case of dead people standing up, chasing you around and trying to bite your face off, it's really difficult to get orders of things like power regulators and capacitors and
individual
especially
components.
if you're talking about surface mount stuff, to be able to get all of the resources together to build surface mount power supplies would very quickly become very difficult. If someone were to have a stockpile of these like Jayson, I would definitely want him on my team. Because there's about 1 billion things that 3.3 volts and 5 volts would be handy to have around for.
True. Very
Yeah,
true.
what doesn't need power?
Say again?
I said, what doesn't need power?
That is true. We're going to have to make
Just add a 12-volt rail, and you've pretty much got, most electronics these days you can tap into, hack into, whatever if you've got that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like we love this dual output breadboard power supply. And I know a lot of our other friends have gotten some from you. So what other projects do you have on here that you've made, and why did you make them, essentially?
Yeah, definitely got a bunch more different cool products and so forth. I'd say another one of the popular ones, I have a breakout board, which is for a Maxim IC used to measure temperatures from a thermocouple. That one kind of also sits and fits along this whole simplicity principle, bringing components that might not be easily used to your breadboard. So that particular board is literally just one chip, one capacitor, and a couple of header pins, but it takes so much of the labor out of getting something like that up and running, out of the equation. It just gives you something you can plug in and go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're prototyping, you don't necessarily want to be dealing with the manufacturing style parts.
Right.
And the chip that he's dealing with is so small that, it's a pain in the butt to deal with. He's built a little breakout board for it. And suddenly you can plug it right into a breadboard and just prototype away with it. Very nice, especially if you're in a situation where you don't have access to modern high precision manufacturing equipment.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to think of your process from idea to production, because what I see happening with a lot of hobbyists is we get to the breadboard point and we have a bajillion wires running everywhere like a rat's nest. And then the act of actually making it into a breadboard or a circuit board is pretty much too much to handle. And so, when you're doing your research to make these boards, obviously you breadboard them first, I imagine. But how much research goes into determining what's the best part and then going from there to the point where you can actually make a circuit board out of it?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of breadboarding involved. Not necessarily for every single design that I do or board that I do, but where it fits, that's definitely one of the steps that's involved. Outside of that, do a ton of reading of data sheets. There's almost always a data sheet for something or another on my desk. And just that kind of legwork, that kind of research around it. And from there, I'm usually pretty quick to jump into the prototyping phase.
Okay.
Where I'll actually design a pretty simple circuit board for whatever the end goal might be, and just start doing little proofs of concept. Getting the boards made, trying it out, seeing what happens,
Sure.
and take it from there.
Sure. And then you use KiCad, is it, for the circuit board itself?
I
Is
do
it?
now, yeah, yep,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Jason switched over to KiCad recently, and I was looking to learn one of the PCB design suites, and I asked in the room what a good one was, and Jason piped up with KiCad, and he gave me a tutorial to follow, and I managed to get through it pretty well. It took a few hours, but pretty painlessly made it through, and now I can do KiCad too, and
Gotcha.
evidently that makes me a brave and powerful person because um, Mike Burr keeps saying that it's too difficult for him to use.
What?
Yeah, he was
No
saying he likes one
way.
of the other packages.
Was it EagleCAD?
No,
Yeah, he's GEDA, I think.
Yeah,
Ah,
That's the
yeah,
one he
yeah,
likes,
yeah.
which I hear is harder than KiCad. So I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
Go
heard that
figure.
too. So I don't know. Maybe
Maybe
Mike's
he's
just a
just
weirdo.
sadistic.
I think Mike's a zombie.
So, okay, so you've drawn up your circuit, so you've done the research first with all your data sheets. You prototyped it, you've then put it into KiCad. What happens from there?
Yeah, so once everything's been prototyped, I've had my test boards sent out, had the boards themselves manufactured, everything's come back. I built the boards, run them through my own tests and so forth. Once everything looks good, from there it's where I start to ramp up production a little bit.
And what kind of tests do you run on these boards?
Oh, sure. Well, basically your power type tests, input output type tests. Really depends on the board and the different components that are on it. I basically try to blow it up.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. But then to a certain degree, because of your research, you know the quasi limits, right?
Mhm.
Of what it can do. So
Absolutely.
so do you like go to that boundary and then just pass it, like double it just to see if it can handle it, or
It depends on the situation. I mean, breadboards, for example, sorry, the power supply boards, for example, there's different specs in there on max current capacity, that kind of stuff, versus how much heat is dissipated and so forth. So for those, those were just a matter of slowly bringing up the current that was being drawn, seeing how the chips actually responded, because everything's different in different scenarios, different situations. The particular boards that I'm using, how the board was laid out, actually has a pretty big impact on how much current it can actually handle.
oh,
So really just testing it, putting it through its paces until they gave up, more or less.
sure.
Like I
sure.
noticed on the revision of the power supply that you sent over here that there's a bunch of holes drilled in the board
Yes.
around the power regulators.
Hmm.
Is that for heat?
Yes, absolutely. So the
Wow.
concept behind that was really to increase the mass on that section of the board, increase the copper in that area, and it actually had a much bigger impact than I thought it was going to have. If you were to compare that version of the board to the version prior, you'd be surprised. They can definitely squeak out a bit more current.
Interesting.
Yeah, Addie had it hooked up to a project she's working on, a
RGB.
long strip of serial adjustable RGBs.
Yep.
And that thing can draw, 1.8
8
amps.
amps. Yep.
And she was nervous about hooking it up to the power supply because the regulator isn't rated quite up that high. But I said, you know what? Go ahead, try it. And was pretty sure you have overload protection on there anyway. But and I was explaining to her that sometimes you should just like touch the regulators and see if they're getting warm. If they're not getting warm, even if all your math is saying that you could be approaching limits, you may not be because lights are turning on and off. You're doing pulse width modulation. You don't know the inner details of what some of the chips are doing. You just run into that physics side of the problem at some point where,
Eventually it gets too hot.
if you're not getting too hot, it's fine.
I guess so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easiest way to test.
And if it catches on fire, that don't blame me.
Blame Jayson, right?
Yeah.
Those regulators are pretty good. Dead short was one of my tests. Don't worry.
So now, the biggest difference I think between a lot of people's boards, like I don't know, I guess general breakout boards and such, is that yours are mostly surface mount technology.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that all by yourself, right? Like you actually do solder paste and reflow and all that goodness to get those chips on and get those LEDs and all that, right?
Yeah, for all the boards that I sell except for one of them, they're all, produced, assembled, the whole 9 yards by myself.
Okay, which is one, crazy. But two, I wonder how you decided to go from like dual inline packaging, for instance, to surface mount. Is it easy to make that transition too?
It was easier than I thought it was going to be. There's a couple of reasons behind it too. There are a lot of components that just aren't available in through-hole style, which is part of my whole business philosophy, bringing components that you couldn't otherwise use, to your prototyping environment. So in a lot of cases, I really didn't have a choice. It was surface mount or nothing.
I see.
From a mass production standpoint, it's actually a lot faster for me to sit down and put together, for example, those power supply boards in a surface mount package than if I were to do the whole thing plated through hole. I could sit down, build 50 of these things in a couple of hours versus plated through hole. I'd be spending days doing the same thing.
Wow. Huh. So, how do you end up?
Well, Addie, you saw how long it took me to prototype that clock that I built for the show.
True.
We've got that little timer that ticks up in our rack in front of us so we can tell how long we've been recording for. I did that on just like a prototype board, and it took days and days to solder all that up. It takes a long time with through wheels sometimes.
Absolutely.
But then like surface mount technology is so much smaller.
Yeah.
So isn't there like that much more risk of getting shorts?
From what I've heard from Jayson and Adam and other people, it's mostly about just having the right tools for the job.
Yep, absolutely. Right tools for the job, learning how everything works together, and just experience is really the number one thing.
And so what kind of tools do you have to help you with that?
Depending on the board, some of my boards I do use solder paste stencils, which it's kind of like screen printing. If you've ever seen how they make T-shirts, a lot of times that'll help me apply the paste more efficiently and carefully. With solder paste, one of the most important things is making sure you use just the right amount of paste.
Okay.
Too much, that's where you start getting those shorts and so forth. Too little, and you can have parts falling off of boards. So,
Gotcha.
Both scenarios not the best, but those screens, those stencils, definitely make a big step in the right direction. Other than that, the only other big component is an oven.
Like an actual oven.
Actual oven, absolutely.
I mean, I think we've watched you do some of your assembly before, and I think it was a toaster oven that you had.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, when I first started selling the power supply boards, my first product there, I got into surface mount, and I was actually using the hot plate method.
What's that?
So basically, if you don't have an oven, and a lot of people do surface mount this way, if you're only doing boards with parts on one side, you can actually get like a skillet, an electric skillet. They might put a plate on or something, put the boards directly on that, and turn up the heat. The skillet warms the board to the point that the solder paste melts, ultimately reflows, and you have a board that's now reflowed.
Now, say you have the same amount, the perfect amount of solder on, or solder paste on your little leg or whatever, and you use this hot plate method. Is it possible to get it so hot that the solder becomes too much solder? Do you know what I mean? Like it melts into a big puddle and then spreads. Is that possible, or is that like silly?
You're only going to have as much solder as you put on the board to begin with. As much as is on the pad. So getting it too hot is not really going to give you any more solder. It's not going to melt any more.
Oh, gotcha.
but you could start burning components, that kind of stuff. That's really the biggest risk with the hot plate method.
Sure, sure. And how does the toaster oven help with that?
For me, it was a matter of being able to control the temperature a little bit more carefully, but also being able to do more boards at a time. With hot plate, I was doing maybe 5 boards at a time. With the oven setup that I have now, depending on what I'm building, I can do 20, 30, 40, sometimes up to 50 boards.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Now, basically what you have to do there is use your silk screening sort of stuff to put your paste on, and then you have to place all your parts on the board.
Correct.
Just set them where they belong, right?
That's correct.
And you use some sort of vacuum pickup tool to do that?
I actually just started using the vacuum tweezers. That's probably been about 2 or 3 months ago. But yeah, they are a small little hand tool. It's got a vacuum on one side to create some suction. Actually pulls apart, keeps it attached to the tip until you have it where you want it. Press a button, breaks the vacuum, and the part stays where you put it, basically.
Huh.
Right. And how careful do you have to be with picking trays of these up to get them into the oven without shaking anything around?
Very careful. Now, it's not as bad as you might think. That solder paste, when it's first applied to the boards and so forth, it's pretty tacky.
I see.
I wouldn't say it's like glue necessarily, but unless you have larger components, they're not going to go too far. When I was first starting out, the bigger problems that I would have would be, dropping another board on some boards that were already on the tray when trying to load up the oven.
Oh.
Yeah, not good. Outside of that, they're not going anywhere.
Huh. Interesting.
It sounds like a very frustrating art to get into.
When you're learning, yes.
Yeah. Because there's so many little tiny things there that the smallest little error and everything can go very, very wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm trying to eventually incorporate surface mount LEDs into some of my projects. I don't even know where to start. Like those things are so tiny that I'd be afraid of, like, say I had a vacuum pickup tool or whatever, I'd be afraid of that vacuum just sucking the part right into it.
Yeah, it definitely takes practice. When I started, the first couple years that I was doing this, I did everything with tweezers, hand tweezers, and a lot of people still do it that way.
Yeah.
For smaller quantities and so forth, they work fine. I still use tweezers to this day for some boards, for fixing placements on some components and so forth. But, it takes...
The big boys, they have vacuum pickup and place machines that are basically robots that do all this for you, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's the next step.
Have you considered making one of those?
Thought about building them. There's really, from what I've found, no real good open source, options for something like that. The software that's involved, to get a good machine, it's no small feat. A lot of these professional machines actually have camera systems on them that can actually see the parts as they're picking them up, placing them, and so forth for positioning. Not easy yet to kind of do it yourself. I think we'll get there, though.
Yeah, we've talked to John S., who used to be a manufacturing engineer for Motorola, and he's dealt with these kinds of machines writ large, and I think he's got some cool ideas on building a smaller one. I don't know if he'll be able to get down to the very, very smallest surface mount scale stuff, though. I mean, the tolerances on that has to be so tight.
Oh, absolutely. I actually once accidentally ordered the wrong size part for one of my prototype boards. Good thing it was only quantity 10, but what was the size designation? 01005, I think it was. The actual size, the components are about a 0.5 millimeter long.
Yeah. Wow.
Literally, they look like pieces of dust. They're tiny.
I'm trying to measure this. What in the world is it?
They are tiny.
So,
I don't even know how you deal with parts that small.
So I'm interested in this in the context of this show. How much infrastructure is it reasonable to build up with a small business like what you're doing, uh, in and uh, how well would do you think you would be able to keep up manufacturing? Is say you were stocked up with parts, how well would you be able to keep up manufacturing in a situation where you didn't say have the ability to order any more parts offline, or be able to have the electricity grid available to you? Uh, does your equipment essentially become useless, or do you think you could continue to use it to create things?
Yeah, I think there's definitely ways around it. Surface mount assembly, as long as you have heat, in a confined space, you can melt that solder paste and you can keep going.
So instead of a
So fire.
toaster oven, you could do a
Solar
wood
oven.
a solar oven.
Yeah, there you go.
I like it.
Hmm.
That's a good idea, actually. I was thinking
What
fire, but that's kind of brutish for the for this task.
I guess fire would work too. I
But
was
then that would
thinking
be
bigger.
hot plate.
Yeah, hey, there you go.
That'd be a hot plate method, and then your solar oven would be a toaster oven type of thing.
Absolutely. Somewhere out there, somebody at a campsite, instead of roasting marshmallows, has to have refloat a board by now.
If not, you can be the first.
There you go.
That's great. That's great. So then so you have, I'm just going to read off some of these boards that you have here on your breakout board section. You have a USB to UART breakout board. What is that?
It's kind of similar to what's on the propeller board. It does the change between USB voltage levels and communication, and UART level and style of communication, just a serial.
Ah,
Yep.
I see. And then there's a 3-axis accelerometer board. And how did you decide to do that? Like, were you into robotics or something like that to come up with making an accelerometer board?
Yeah, the accelerometer board, that was kind of decided on around what was available in the market.
Ah.
I looked at a couple of other sites that were selling different accelerometer boards and everything, and I was hard pressed to find anything for less than $20.
Mm.
And that
Wow.
just seemed a little bit much for my taste, So
Right.
I was doing some research and so forth, came across that particular component that I ended up using, and economically made a lot more sense.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So.
yours is like $6.
Yeah,
That's
and
like-
that's the case
that's
with a
like-
lot of the stuff that Jason is doing. It's
Yeah.
he's I don't know, he might be making a few enemies in the community because he's sort of exposing some of the margin hike-ups that are happening on some other sites. These things are less expensive to manufacture than some other suppliers would have you believe.
It's pretty nutty. And then
Yep.
we've got the so Whisker talked about or you talked, I think, about the thermocouple to digital converter breakout
Yes.
board. We have a 5x8 LED matrix bare board because everybody loves LEDs.
Oh yeah.
8-channel PNP driver. Where did you come up with that from?
That board was actually one, like a couple of the different boards that I have there, that kind of spawned from personal need.
Oh.
So that LED matrix board that you talked about before,
Mhm.
just as a personal project for myself here. I've been working on putting together a bunch of those to build an LED sign. And one of the things that I'm going to need to power that sign is going to be a number of PNP transistors.
Ah.
So I figured, hey, why not get those transistors together, have them in an easy to use package, something that I could put on a breadboard if I wanted to, and
Yeah.
there you go.
Bam. Very nice. Very nice. And then does that mean that the 7-position jumper board is also for this LED project, or is that something completely different?
Yep, those are actually designed to fit right on the back of those LED modules.
Haha. Cool. Very
Mhm.
cool. And then we also have a PIC USB development board.
Man.
So that's a really tiny board. And what is that exactly?
Now, which one are you referring to? You talking about
The
the plated
PIC
through hole?
microcontroller board there.
It's the last one, I think, is PIC F14,
Yes,
K50.
yes, yes.
Yep,
Yeah,
that one.
that's actually one of the newer boards that I have on the store there. That one is essentially a quick start for people who want to start experimenting with USB
Ah.
signs and circuits and so forth. That board's been through a number of different iterations over, its lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that I compare that kind of to my breadboard power supply analogy. It's creating circuits to do USB development and prototyping and so forth. Not super difficult to do, but time consuming. So you
Mm-hmm.
get a board like this, and you kind of have the ability to hit the ground running.
Sure.
Yeah, replace it with a prop.
I was waiting for you to say that.
So, you were mentioning your LED board project. Along with that, and do you have any other projects that you're working on the side that's not necessarily for Tautic.com or for work?
Yeah, I got a couple other electronics projects that I've been working on. One in particular for a while now actually uses those same thermocouple chips that are on that one breakout board, except this is kind of a self-contained unit that has 8 of those in there. So you could actually monitor 8 different thermocouples at the same time. It's got a USB port on it, so you can connect it to a computer,
Cool.
so on and so forth.
Cool. And what are you doing with that? I mean, 8 temperature sensors is quite a bit, it seems. So what do you need 8 of them for?
Well, a lot of times you'll see stuff like that used in industries. If you have an oven, great example. Um, when ovens are running, the temperature inside the oven, typically you think is right at what you would set the controller for. You set it
Right.
for 375. The whole oven is 375.
You hope.
Doesn't really work out that way.
Right.
You could have different airflow in different parts of your oven. You could have, maybe pieces of metal interfering with, temperature in different spots. Really, the only way to know is to measure it.
Sure.
So one way to measure it is to put a number of these thermocouples at different spots inside the oven, close the door, fire it up, and monitor the temperature over time so you can then know for a fact what's going on inside. So
Sure.
that's one application.
And is that what you're using it for, or do you have something else in mind?
Yeah, no, that's definitely what I have in mind.
Oh,
Is that
okay.
for your toaster? Are you doing multiple zone heating in there?
It's got a single zone, but definitely will be hooking it up to that at some point, just out of curiosity.
Sure.
I can tell just by looking through the glass doors that it is not perfectly uniform. You just watch the different pads melt at different times throughout the oven. You can almost see it.
Cooking with Jayson.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Okay, so you've got this 8 temperature sensor board thing, and your LED. Are these RGB LEDs that you're working with? For this
Single color.
Single color. Okay, so single color LED boards. Any other projects that you've got on the queue or hopper?
Those are really the only 2 personal projects right now. The rest of the stuff that I'm working on are, boards that are slated for the store eventually.
Oh, and what do you have going on there?
Well,
If you can say.
the 2 that I can talk about, both actually kind of stemmed from talking to the IRC group that you guys have running and so forth.
Cool.
One being a cool little angle sensor,
Okay.
which can actually read the position of a magnet, outputs a voltage based on the orientation of that magnet or the rotation. Definitely going to be a cool one.
Cool.
And another one is actually going to be my first foray into Arduino shields. And that's going to be a little shield with an analog to digital converter for measuring analog voltages and so forth in a higher precision than the Arduino otherwise could. And it's also going to have a digital to analog converter to output.
Awesome.
Yeah. And if it sounds good enough, audio-wise, I know it'll be a little bit slow for that, but if
Right.
it sounds good enough, I might be using it for a little bit of 8-bit style DSP experimentation. That'll be fun.
Even though it has Arduino on it?
Well, I've got a propeller that is Arduino Shield compatible that
Oh, that
Martin
is
Hodge
true.
sent me,
That
so
is
I
true.
can just write my own propeller drivers for it.
And it won't say Arduino on it, so you're good to go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And the tilt sensor is actually a somewhat of a zombie tech related project. It's for John S's satellite
tracker.
tracking system for automatically turning an antenna to follow a satellite as it arcs across the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool.
So
Yeah, definitely.
when all communication is down, the hams still have it.
Right.
Wahahaha. And you're a ham too, right?
I am. Indeed, I am.
Huzzah!
Did you get your antenna hung back up, Jason?
I got a cheap little wire in my basement. It's not really doing as much as I'd hope.
That's okay.
I'm not surprised though. It is the basement after all.
Well, mine's getting more on a different band than it is on the band that it's supposed to get it on. So, oh well. So very cool. Now, when you first made this breadboard supply, I know you said you made a couple more because it sounded like other people wanted it. But when did you make the decision to turn it into an actual business?
The actual, good question. I would say that when I decided to go, more mainstream, create a brand, start trying to market that brand and move forward with it. Officially, it was probably about 8 months ago.
Okay.
So,
Not too long ago then.
no, not too long ago. Prior to that, I had been selling some of the boards and so forth on a very much more hobbyist scale and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the real transition point was about 8 months ago.
Gotcha. And has it been adequate business given that a lot of what you're producing is mainly for hobbyists?
Yeah, no, I'd say so.
Okay.
Definitely.
Any hopes it'll turn full time at some point, or do you think that's still a while from now?
I think it's a while from now, but that's definitely a goal, perhaps, if it can get there.
Okay. That works.
I know he's been taking some strides in that direction with putting up videos of assembly of the boards and some promotional material and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it's always, I think, the goal of a lot of people, especially engineers, I think, or at least the engineers that we know, that their goal one day is to become self-sufficient, in terms of not having to work for a company to get their income,
Which is
but
kind of
instead
weak
do
because in the
consulting
context
or
of this show, self-sufficient tends to mean that you can survive the undead.
yeah.
So, for you guys out there who would, just like to get out from the thumb of a company and start your own small business, that's fine and dandy. But, man up, get a chainsaw.
Take care of surface mount technology with chainsaws.
Fell trees,
Like a lumberjack. That's just silliness.
To power your wood-fired reflow oven, absolutely.
Yeah.
There you
That
go.
all makes sense.
Strip mine some coal. Come on.
That is too silly. So, I noticed on actually one of your last projects, I almost want to say the PIC USB development board that we were just talking about, that it's open hardware.
Yes.
How did you, are you worried that it's open hardware? I mean, obviously not, but why aren't you worried?
Yeah, definitely not worried. I think there's going to be really something to say about open source hardware over the next few years. I think we're starting to see a lot of momentum in that direction. I actually went to the open source hardware convention in New York City a couple months back. Got to meet a lot of cool people out there and see kind of some of the trends that are happening. There's actually some big businesses out there that are starting to jump into this concept as well. I think Ford was actually one of them with one of their cars or something that's up and coming. But
Open source?
components of it,
Okay.
not the whole thing.
I was about to say.
It's not going to be a DIY vehicle per se, but I think the specifics are around that. You'd have to check online for details, but I think the specifics were around some of the car interface systems and so forth.
Sure.
A lot of guests on this show went to Open Hardware Summit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are all over there drinking and having a good time.
So, and you were saying that you noticed some trends. What kind of trends are you noticing?
Really just adoption. If you look at a lot of these different businesses out there that are doing the same thing as myself, open source has definitely become a very strong and common theme quickly.
Yep. We work with Parallax on our other podcast, firstspin.tv, and I noticed that the new boards that they're sending us that haven't been released yet, They all have the Open Hardware logo silk screened on the back of them, which
Do
is a
they?
change.
Interesting.
Yep.
Whoa,
So even some of the big boys are going
that's a big
Open
deal.
Hardware.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
You heard it here first, folks.
Oh my gosh, you are right. There is the open. Sorry.
Yeah. They
That's
just finalized the logo for open source hardware
Yeah.
the end of last year now. And it's nice to see it on boards already from big companies.
Yeah. And sorry,
No,
you
definitely.
you were gonna
No,
say, Jason?
I was just going to say, the whole concept for open source hardware and so forth. I definitely get the concern or the concept of concern around, taking one's design and literally putting it out there for anyone to use.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's a whole discussion on itself about innovation and how not open sourcing something could arguably stifle what could become of a product.
Sure.
By opening something like this up, it gives other people the opportunity to really have a starting point and to improve upon it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see my designs improved upon by other people. Really, the one foundation that I think has to happen, though, is accountability through the chain. Somebody uses an open source design, does what they want to do with it, that's excellent. But I think there needs to be almost some kind of chain of custody, that maintains that attribution for all the people that have worked on the design, through the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
So are you more of a software side of things? Are you more of a GNU sort of thinking person or an MIT license sort of person?
Ooh, good question.
And of course, there's the BSD weirdos in there too.
There's so many different licenses out there. Let's put it this way: the last
you understand what I mean, though. With GNU,
absolutely.
you have this viral licensing that carries on and maintains that strict. You have to re-release it as open sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas MIT is like, if you take this, turn it into a product, and call it yours, it's yours.
No, absolutely. I think the whole licensing debate there really depends on what's being licensed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The last piece of software that I put an open source license on, I think I used the MIT license, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So, there could be variances there. And I see open source hardware the same thing. There's already different classifications of licensing around there, just given that it's so new and so forth. There's so many different ways that, you could license things with different permissions and so forth. Some people are open source licensing hardware with non-commercial permissions.
Ah.
It seems a little restrictive to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can understand.
I think the main thing is that if you want to compete in this market, you have to be open. It's just not even a question anymore. I'm sure the reason why Parallax is putting their designs up as open designs is because they understand that the only reason the Arduino is as popular as it is because it's open. The chip itself that runs the Arduino, the Atmega or whatever, is not open. It is, not produced by the people who are pushing Arduino. It's just, some random microcontroller from out there in the microcontroller world. So now that propeller boards are going to be open hardware, there's really no discernible difference between, benefits of having an Arduino be open source versus the old prop boards being closed. Now that they're open, I was like, why would anybody bother using such an old single core chip when you can get an open design with a multi-core chip?
Shameless plug.
What can I say? I'm biased. But yeah, I think that it's a really good move that a company like Parallax would go, okay, yeah, I understand that in order to open up innovation and allow my my user base of my platform to be able to change my designs slightly to better suit their purposes so that they can reuse my technology in their bigger designs. Because, all the industrial guys, they don't want a demo board. They want something that can do one job very well. And they want to be able to use your chip. But they don't necessarily want to pay an electrical engineer if they don't have to. If they can just tweak your board design a little bit and have 100,000 of them printed, then that saves them money.
Absolutely.
And then you just sold an extra 100,000 microcontrollers.
Right. No, absolutely. I think one of the other arguments that you see a lot around open source hardware, from a big business perspective, they look down and they see all this, open source, and the biggest question is, well, how are you going to make money doing that?
Mm.
Oh, look at the Arduino platform. I think it's a perfect example. Given their open source nature and so forth, we have all these other boards that do basically the same thing as the Arduino, some in different ways, some in not. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's any negative impact whatsoever on Arduino. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think each of these different offspring, for lack of a better term, kind of benefits each other.
Mm.
Yep, the real value there came from just having a standardized footprint, and that allowed many, many things to happen.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people to make a lot of money off of shields and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
A whole little cottage industry has grown up out of the happenstance that somebody was nice enough to put the design up for free.
Right.
All
It's
right.
Very interesting.
We've got about 10 minutes left here, and as we always do, we have to turn this over to Addie to really get down to the nitty-gritty here, the important questions that viewers want to know.
Okay, but I had to ask one question first because John suggested it, and I think it's a very good question. Well, two, kind of. One, how do you find the time to do all of these projects?
That's an excellent question. For me, it's a lot of very early mornings and a lot of very late nights and a couple of weekends here and there.
I see.
Time is a very valuable commodity, that's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding.
Mhm.
And when Whisker does projects, it's really easy for him to dive into electronics and I don't mind because I'm into electronics, I'm a quasi geek. It's all good. Is your wife a geek?
Absolutely, unquestionably not. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure. So what does she see your tinkering as? Or your business? I mean, obviously it brings money, but it takes time away from her. So how does she deal with that, I guess?
Well, absolutely. It's really just an expansion on the whole work-life balance thing. She definitely does see it as a business, primarily.
So less that it's your hobby.
Correct.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, just wondering. All right, so zombie tech questions that I ask all of the zombie tech folks. What 3 tools would you bring to the zombie apocalypse bunker?
Now, I'm pretty sure Jason has listened to the show before, so he'd better come packing.
We hope.
What 3 tools would I bring? Well, I almost quite literally never leave home without my logic analyzer.
Okay.
That might be a stretch of the truth, but that would definitely be one tool. Second tool would be a soldering iron. Can't do much without that.
Yep.
And third tool will bring along power source.
Haha.
Yeah.
All right. So
Excellent.
what kind of soldering iron, considering you're going to have a hard time finding a wall outlet?
But I brought a power source, don't forget.
All right. So your power source is going to be something that can generate high current and adds U.S. wall power mains rating stuff.
Of course.
All
of
right.
course.
So what did you have in mind for a mobile power source?
What did I have in mind for a mobile power source? Definitely some form of generator with solar backing, of course.
All right. So a petroleum run generator?
Most likely.
Okay. And solar backup.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing it's going to have some sort of battery bank as well then.
Correct.
All right. So batteries, generator, solar panels. Sounds like Jason is going to have some sort of a big van or truck to be able to carry this around on.
Ideal vehicle for traveling in the zombie apocalypse?
Something with big wheels.
Big wheels.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Our last guest was talking about a Zeppelin for flying over
Be
the zombies.
Hey,
awesome.
that would work.
Jason is running over the zombies.
2 birds, 1 stone. 2 zombies, 1 stone.
There 2 zombies, 1 tire.
There you go.
There you go. Excellent. Except
There was actually an awesome Flash game where there was a zombie apocalypse, and your job was to drive through like downtown Atlanta or something, where the traffic's terrible.
mhm.
And there's zombies jumping out at you and landing on your windshield, and you have to like punch out your windshield and punch the zombies and get them off your hood. It was really fun.
That is silliness.
See, it's not a terrible idea. And you got all that huge generator behind you, so you're good to go.
True.
Yeah, it's
Very
a similar idea to Addie's zombie truck. I think she wants to have a generator built right into the bed of it.
Mhm.
There you go.
Mhm. Although I think I want to try to see if we can optimize solar power.
Yeah, solar is definitely a good idea for after the end times.
Right.
There's a mirror reference for everybody.
Yep. And let's see, what book would you find most useful in the zombie apocalypse bunker?
What book?
Mhm.
That is an excellent question. I would say some form of electrical reference. I'm not sure I can think of one off the top of my head.
We've had people bring the art of electronics. We've had people bring their collections of data sheets. This is a really good one.
Yep. Well, hopefully somewhere in there we will have something that you can use. The data sheets, I imagine, would be very useful for you.
Yeah, no, data sheets, that would definitely work.
Okay. And I'm trying to think, there was one more. Aha, I know. Now, besides your family, who else would you like to have in your zombie apocalypse bunker?
Well, it would have to be you guys. I mean, come on. Come on. Who wouldn't say that, right?
Thanks. Well, assume that we're there. Somebody besides us, because we can't interview ourselves.
That's a very good point. That is a very good point. I would I'd probably say my grandfather if I could.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Cool.
mean, talk about
Hey, that's a good idea.
good power source. Dude could build you a nuclear generator.
He could.
Oh, man. Did he ever take you in, like, on a tour of his nuclear stuff?
Pretty sure that would have been a no-no.
Yeah.
Dang. Dang.
It's like bring your Jason to work day. Doesn't really
There you go.
doesn't really work at the nuclear power plant.
That'd be
What's that
so
alarm?
cool. What's that alarm? What's that big red button?
Mhm.
No. It releases the zombie virus.
Yeah, he was primarily doing safety systems, so I'm sure there's a good reason I wasn't brought along.
Ah, I see.
My grandfather actually worked at a power plant as well.
Yeah?
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, coal though.
Ah.
Real
see.
power plant, real man's power plant. Coal.
What is it with you and real men?
Coal.
Freaking Midwesterners.
None of that science stuff. We're gonna light fire. No, my grandfathers were both like seriously hardcore. One of them worked in a tank factory, and the other one worked at a coal plant.
That is absolutely silly.
You gotta love it.
That is absolutely silly. Well, I think in terms of other questions, I think that's it. I think we'll make sure to send the coordinates so that we can get your power generator and 2 zombies, 1 tire vehicle there.
Excellent.
You should call it that. 2 zombies, 1 tire.
That's a great name.
Instead of the
or TZOT, TZOT.
TZOT. There you go. There you go, man. We got
Absolutely.
a name.
It's got an acronym. It's real. That validates it.
Exactly. Excellent.
All right, Jason, is there anything you want to plug before we finish up here?
Just silliness.
Plug. Visit my website, of course.
Yes, Tautic.com. TAUTIC.com. And you can also find him on Twitter at Tautic.
Yep. I keep it simple.
Yep, very simple.
You can find us on Twitter at TYMKRS. That's sort of like a constant content feed Good luck, listeners, if you can keep up with all the stuff we put out in a week. It basically means you should get back to your projects and stop spending so much time listening to us. But, we love you guys, even if you're slackers sometimes. You can download this podcast every Thursday at zombietech.tv. We also do firstspin.tv, which is all about Addie learning how to program. She annoys Roy Altham and I every week, asking us question after question about programming and microcontrollers and electronics and stuff.
They love it.
Yep. We put up with it. All right, that's it for us for this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.